A couple of weeks ago, Yumble released a video titled "Why Roundabouts Are Not As Good As You Thought They Are", in which he tested and compared a four-way intersection using a time traffic light from Traffic Manager or a roundabout, again set up with Traffic Manager, and concluded that in cases of heavy traffic, a traffic light is the more sensible option. And since then, Biffa, I'm aware of, has released a couple of videos in which he has attempted to tweak a roundabout to improve its efficiency and get it to achieve similar traffic flows to a four-way light. He hasn't had much luck yet, and I'm sure other people have been trying as well. I thought that I would give it a go myself. So I've replicated the setup using the same map, which is the Interchange Test Map by Rex Luminor, available on the Steam Workshop. I've marked out north, and it's just so that we can keep our bearings. So I've got the time traffic light set up, pretty similar to how Yumble had it, and it's backing up about halfway to where the highway ends, in between light cycles. I have noticed that towards the west, traffic is a little bit heavier, and it sometimes backs up onto the highway and can take a couple of cycles before it to clear through. It's not too bad at the moment now, but I do expect that when we transition to the roundabout, there will be a bit more traffic queuing coming from the west than from any other direction. And I believe in one of Biffa's videos, he noticed as well that traffic was heavier east to west than it was north to south. Probably some small bias in the way that the game handles spawning vehicles and pathfinding those vehicles. But if we want to improve on the roundabout to get it to increase traffic flow, first we have to understand what it is about the roundabout setup that restricts traffic flow so much. So we'll just we can probably pause it. The general setup for a roundabout in City Skylines is you take a circle, particularly using a tool like Roundabout Builder, and you generally want a pretty large one. I think a good rule of thumb is the inner radius about 3 times the width of the roads that are intersecting, and you'd usually go 2 or 3 lanes, and you just have a nice big circle. I'm going to go slightly smaller just so that I can keep the circle for the roundabout that I eventually end up building, which will need to be a little bit tighter than most roundabouts. But on the plus side, you do save a little bit of space. So I'm going to go to about a radius of 48 and construct it. Now this is 2 lanes. We'll probably need more lanes than that. I'm going to use a 3-lane one-way road from Vanilla++. So you have a circle, and each road comes in at a perpendicular angle, and then you generally take Traffic Manager and with a Control Shift set it up so you have a single lane to exit, giveaways on all the entrances, and traffic on the roundabout can continue through a blocked junction where traffic entering the roundabout must wait. And so this is not very efficient under extremely high traffic. To make it a little bit fairer, I'm going to change out these roads that I have approaching and just make them 3 lanes each direction. So base game 6-lane road. That is not the base game 6-lane road, because it's not a 6-lane road. And I'll do that on every entrance. Once the traffic on the roundabout is flowing, it flows reasonably well. However, when we zoom out, we can see that the traffic is trailing right back onto the highway. And when we zoom in, we can see that there's not that many vehicles coming through at a time. So we want to try and maximize as many vehicles using the roundabout as possible. And we notice that the inner lane doesn't get quite as much use as the outer 2 lanes, and the outermost lane gets the most use. There's always some cars on the outermost lane, and we can see why, because that's the lane that they have to use if they want to get off the roundabout at some point. And this isn't terribly realistic when we think about roundabouts in real life. Generally, the main problem with roundabouts of this design is that they are set up similar to how a highway is set up. So you've got your exit lanes and you've got lanes that continue on. But highways are set up this way because they want to prioritize the continuing motion, which in this case is the motion that goes around the roundabout. But the purpose of a roundabout is not to go around and around the roundabout. The purpose of a roundabout is to get from one exit or from one road to another, and you've only got a short space that you need to traverse around the roundabout. And you don't want to be doing a lot of merging on the roundabout like you would see on a highway. You want to be able to enter and exit without having to look over your shoulder to find places to merge, especially when you're having to also look at other intersections ahead of you and make sure that you've not got cars that are going to be impeding your right of way. So if we were to naively try and fix this, we could come along and use Traffic Manager and say, yeah, you can keep going and come off from any lane within the roundabout, because we want to try and get as many vehicles through the roundabout as possible, and that requires vehicles exiting the roundabout. And that improves traffic flow a little bit. You can see we get a little bit more cars on the roundabout. When they start going, you get a few more coming through at the time. But it's generally not much better, and I'm waiting for an example. So you see right there, we had a blue car try and turn off the roundabout where a truck wanted to continue on. And ideally what would have happened is that car would have been on a different lane if it wanted to come through this exit. But to do that, we'd have to control its behavior where it entered and where it exited and link them up together, which is where the different design for the roundabout comes in. Now, unfortunately, this design for a roundabout is a lot less easy to set up. You've got a few extra steps, and in addition to needing Traffic Manager, you will need some form of road anarchy. So I have Kleit's Find Road Anarchy. Move It will work. It can get a little bit fiddly. Or you could use Network Multi-Tool and its Place Road features. So particularly the create connection, we'll be able to produce the desired results. So the first step we're going to do is we're going to brace the roundabout, and then we're going to come through, and I'm going to turn off bending and also turn on anarchy. So we want to come out at a 45-degree angle in between each spoke and create an additional node. And then we can delete those. We've got our new bracing. I'm also going to delete one node from each of these ends, and you can see they're all different lengths, so I'm going to come back a little bit further and instead measure out 10 units will do. And then the next step from here is to create our connection from where the road's going to enter the roundabout. So from these new nodes that we've created, I'm just going to come out to a straight line back to this new segment that we've put in. And these are going to be our entrances and exits to the roundabout. And immediately you might notice that we've got the entrance and the exit joining at the same node. And that's going to be very helpful in letting us set up our traffic manager when we get to that. For now, we don't need these roads, and we also don't need the nodes that they used to connect to. If you're not using Network Multi-Tool, you can use Traffic Manager, which you'll have to have anyway, and use Control S to stop vehicles changing lanes in there, and that's going to be important to making sure that the traffic flows smoothly through the roundabout. However, I'm going to just go straight ahead and remove these nodes. So now we can come back and connect up these six-lane roads coming in. And we will also upgrade each of these dirt roads. Once again, we'll need some kind of anarchy. If you're not using Find Road Anarchy and are instead using Network Multi-Tool or Move It, you can just go straight to using the paved road just to save yourself some hassles. So these are all one way because they are our entrances, and we'll just make sure that they're going the right way. So you're not crossing traffic, you're coming in, you're coming out, you're heading in, and that one should be heading out. And from there we can delete our bracing roads. Now, this is all the roads that we need. We can come through and set up our traffic manager. So the first step is going to be setting up giveaways, and it's going to be very similar to your standard setup. You just want giveaway coming into the roundabout, and once again we will allow those on the roundabout to continue straight through a blocked intersection, while those entering the roundabout have to wait. And I'll do the same thing up here, allowing those approaching the roundabout to not stop as they enter this little intersection here, which the game treats as an intersection, but we want to consider just the road continuing through. To help with that, we'll set up our lane connectors to not have anyone changing lanes or doing U-turns here. So now we need to set up our lane connectors for each of the junctions where we enter and exit the roundabout. And to do this, we're going to have entering the roundabout from the inside lane outwards, heading into the inside lane outwards. And we're also going to allow right turns from the outside lane inwards, but only so long as we're not creating a conflict. So when we get to the second lane here, if we head across, we're creating a conflict with the rightmost lane, which is also heading into the roundabout. If here we only had 2 lanes, then this, when we went from the inside out, we would have run out of lanes to give this third rightmost lane its own lane inside the roundabout, so we'd only be turning. And then we would also be able to allow turns from the center lane right onto the exit of the roundabout. And then continuing along the roundabout, and then exiting the roundabout, we go from the outmost lane in, and then once again we allow continuing along through the roundabout only so long as it doesn't create a conflict. So here we have a conflict when the center lane tries to continue through because the innermost lane is exiting. So if this exit was only 2 lanes, then this innermost lane wouldn't have a lane to exit into, and we'd have the center lane also continue around. So using this little setup, you can have roundabouts that intersect with roads that have different number of lanes, and the roundabout can change the number of lanes it has as it goes around without disrupting the formula. The formula should still work, which is useful if you need to tweak the number of lanes to get prioritize certain different directions of traffic flow. So I will continue through and set all these up, and I already know what's going on, so I'm not strictly following the formula. But when you're entering, you come from the inside lane out and allow turns where there's no conflict, and for the exiting you go from the outmost lane in, and once again you allow continuing through the roundabout where there's no conflict. And that's the basic setup. You can, if you want, come through with different mods like Node Controller and just smooth out, particularly these. You might want to set straight edges, and it'll just, mostly for aesthetics, you can get slight performance boosts out of that, but that's not a significant addition. You don't really need it. Along here I wouldn't say set straight edges, except possibly for these here. So you might want, you might want to set a straight edge going around the roundabout. If I can get it right. Oops. But heading onto the roundabout in particular, if you allow it to maintain its angle, then you've got much less room where cars are hanging back from the intersection, which will increase the speed at which they can get out. The other thing to remember is if you're not using, so if you're using a highway road from the base game, then you should also come through and change the speed limits. I'm using a modded road, well, not really a modded road, but a downloaded asset, so it's already got the default speed limit, and that'll just allow, once again, you've got a larger gap where cars can pull out. They're not having to accelerate so fast. It should just speed up flow a little bit. And also, if you're putting this in an environment where people will be walking, controlling the pedestrian crossings may also give you some boosts of performance. But we'll start this up and everyone will find their way onto the road. And we'll see how this goes. So it'll probably be a little bit of an unfair start because it's got already significant backup. But the lights can handle such a backup. So we'll see if the roundabout can as well. And the major benefit of this style of roundabout is that you can have 3 lanes from the roundabout exiting the roundabout. So you're getting as many people as possible off the roundabout, making room for more to enter. What makes this setup of roundabout different from your default setup in playing Cities Skylines? Even different from when you would add in this little split to try and improve the speed at which vehicles can enter and exit the roundabout, is because you have the entrance and the exit of the roundabout at the same node. When you're using Traffic Manager, you can set the behavior of exiting the roundabout dependent on the node that it entered. So here you have different behavior for exiting the roundabout when you're entering from this road than when you're entering from any other road, which is much more akin to how a roundabout operates in real life. And we can follow, so if you're in this lane here, if we show the lane connectors, you can either turn right straight away, or even if you head into the roundabout, when you get to the next node, your only option is to exit. So you have a lane that can only turn right or straight. And in the center lane, your only option is to enter the roundabout, because to turn right would create a conflict. And when you exit, when you get to the next node, your only option is once again to exit the roundabout, since continuing through would create a conflict. And the third lane, the innermost lane, can only enter the roundabout, of course, and it can now exit at any entrance it likes. It can even go all the way around and come back to the node where it entered and exit again. So if you end up stuck in the wrong lane, you can just continue around as much as you like, which is something that you can do on a roundabout in real life, even if it's advised that you don't. In some places you're not strictly allowed to, but it is something that you can do, and your behavior is predictable, assuming that you use your indicators to indicate when you're going to exit the roundabout. You're not causing a disruption to other vehicles. And we can see in the patterns of the behavior that the traffic is following, you get several cars exiting at the same time, and you tend to get several cars entering at the same time as well. So you've got a little bit more of that platoon style that you'd see with lights, though it's less of a platoon and more of just a front of cars entering and exiting. Doesn't always happen, particularly if you're turning right, because you're only crossing into the same lane, you're merging into the lane and not crossing over any lanes, so there's much less potential for conflict. There are 2 downsides to this style of roundabout though, and the first is that it's much more complex setup. You need to have a 45-degree angle that you're offsetting your nodes on. So tools such as your roundabout builder, they can still help, particularly with forming the circle. But once you've created that circle, you still need to put in a fair bit of work to get it set up. The other major downside is the space that it takes up. So you can see it extends out a fair bit past the roundabout. This is already a fairly large roundabout. Although if you were doing the traditional style of roundabout, then you might be doing an even larger one to try and get as much traffic as you can through. So it's been running for a little while now, and you can see that coming from the, where are we? That's north. So coming from the east is all very clear. Coming from the other directions is very much not though. So coming from the north is all right along here, but backed up a long way there, and backed up a long way from the south as well. It's not backed up quite so far from the west, which is actually a reversal from the directions that were struggling under the traffic lights. But one thing that we might notice is that there is a lot of traffic in this inside lane, particularly coming from the north, though also coming from the south as well. Less so coming from the west. You've got a little bit more lane sharing. And part of that is the traffic AI having conflicts with the path that can go in two directions. But you can see most of the ones in this inside lane are continuing around the roundabout. And that can be an indication that, yes, there's actually a preference for vehicles to be entering, vehicles coming from the north or the south to be heading off in the east or west directions instead. And you might decide to change the number of lanes servicing those directions accordingly. So we might try using only 2 lanes to exit in the north and south directions. And if we do that, then we're going to have to set up all of our lane connectors again because we've deleted some of them. So once again, entering the roundabout from the innermost lane out and turn wherever possible. We can't make that turn because there's a conflict. And exiting the roundabout from the outermost lane possible, turning where possible, continuing through where there's no conflict. Now we can't head out here with this innermost lane because there's not enough lanes to go through. But what that does mean is that this center lane can now also head around through the roundabout because it's not creating any conflict with any other lane continuing through the roundabout, or exiting the roundabout rather. So we can do the same thing over here, and 1 to exit there, 2 to exit there, and this one can also continue around, and see what that does to the traffic. So immediately you see you've got a little bit more lane sharing, a lot more lane sharing, as you've got additional traffic flow turning left, sorry, and you've got slightly less options if you want to continue straight. And doing that, making that change should not have impacted on any traffic decisions coming from these lanes, because they only had 1 lane that could turn that way anyway. So reducing a lane coming out wouldn't have made any difference to them. And you can see traffic's completely cleared on the east-west direction now. So let's keep it running and see if we can get that traffic down on the north-south direction. So the change we made hasn't really solved the problem of them all using the same lane to queue in. They're still all using the same lane to queue in, it's just this time it's the center lane. So I'll try reverting that change, and we can see it's the same up here as well. They are using all three lanes when they're getting close, but I think I will try going back to 3 lanes coming out here, just to, once again, we want to try and get as many vehicles off the roundabout as we can at any time. So come through and re-upgrade these, and then we've got to do all the lane connectors again. Something I noticed while editing is that at this moment I made a mistake. So when resetting up these lane connectors, I forgot to remove the one that allows the center lane to continue around, which should be done because now it conflicts with the innermost lane exiting the roundabout. Well, it's been a little while now, and as it's been running, there's been one interesting development. The traffic coming from the south has died right down. That's all been getting through, and traffic from the east is staying nice and steady. Traffic from the north has pretty much not changed from where it was around this interchange up here. It's gone down a little bit. It was reaching around here earlier. However, traffic from the west has sprung up again, and now it's tailing back. That's even further than it was with the intersection. So I'm not sure what changed, but all of a sudden it just seemed to switch around. Coming from the south was getting through, and coming from the west was not. So there's probably definitely some bias somewhere in the coding that determines when cars move where, and when they spawn and where they spawn, because that was the direction that was busiest with the lights as well. However, it's in a bit of a steady state. All the traffic getting there gets through, and it's not building up traffic, with the exception along the west, but it was doing that with the lights as well. I want to see what will happen if we clear the traffic, start from scratch, and just see if it can't pass through the traffic to clear it from the heavy traffic like the lights could. Can it at least keep up with the traffic coming through here? The short answer is no. It's been running for a while, and we're pretty much where we were before. We've got 2 directions which are clearing very consistently, but 2 directions which simply aren't. And I'm not sure why. This setup should be symmetrical, but it's just not quite working out on those 2 directions, but that's okay. One thing I have noticed is that, especially coming from these directions, you get a lot more traffic going around the roundabout to turn right instead of just taking the right turn. So here as well, you've got a heap of traffic going all the way around, whereas on these, so we've got 1 truck here, and if we come here, oops, that's the wrong one. If we come here, then we've got none at all. So I'm not sure what's causing that, and I don't know how much of a factor it is in making these two directions a lot harder to clear. So what would my recommendation be? Well, first of all, don't let the traffic get this heavy. But if it is this heavy, then traffic lights, definitely. They take up a lot less space and they're pretty much just as effective. The queuing distance is slightly longer for the south in particular. Roughly the same for the east and significantly shorter for the west and the north. But this style of roundabout is still one of the most efficient ways to set up your roundabout in terms of traffic throughput. So still use this roundabout where you can be bothered. Don't use it for only one lane. It's a waste of time, because when you come in one lane, you've only got one lane to go into anyway. As I mentioned before, 2 lanes is where it works best. With 3 lanes, you're really starting to push the traffic that a roundabout is useful for. And of course, going up to 4 lanes is not really an efficient use of your intersections. But there are ways that we can improve on this design slightly. So one of the easiest is to take these nodes here. You can use your node controller to just widen them out a bit using shift and click to get them to line up. I've already done these. You can also use move it, holding Alt to keep it snap straight, and move it in nice and close so it takes up less room. And if you do that, oops, let us undo that and bring it in. Obviously there's a limit to how far you can bring it in before it starts clipping, but bring it in as far as we can. And let's done that again. So obviously, if you get it wrong, you can really confuse your traffic. But we can reduce the size of the roundabout a fair bit. If you've got your roundabout set up like this, if you're going for a lower traffic scenario, then you can actually have quite a small roundabout indeed. So if I were to make an intersection between 2 of the base game roads with your standard 4 lanes, then when I put in the roundabout, I would probably only end up having a roundabout that is about, say, this large, which is, actually, I'd probably go even smaller than that. So I might even go down as far as having the inner radius being smaller than the road itself, which is very tight for just your standard city skylines roundabout, and you'd still get similar throughput to having a larger roundabout. Of course, when you've got to do the whole diagonal setup, I find that it's often easier to set it up nice and large, and then use move it to move in the pieces. Just move in the 4 nodes that make up the intersections to make it smaller. I wouldn't do it here though, because of the high traffic. You do still need a decently large roundabout. And of course you can go through and you can use your intersection marking tool. In general, you'd probably end up with dashed lines going around the roundabout, and then you'd have a different set of dashes coming off the roundabout. I'm going to stick in another one there for an intersection so that I can get to that one. And oops, truncate it. So I would say that that one doesn't need to show. And then for this one, once again, truncate it. And there you've got a nice simple markings. Obviously these are straightforward. And of course you can decorate with rocks and trees on the inside to make it look nice. So yeah, they can make a pretty good looking roundabout if you're putting them on a smaller road, a 4-lane road. And these are particularly good roundabouts to use if you've got an intersection between roads that would be suitable for a roundabout, but the roads have different numbers of lanes. So I would recommend them for there, because your setup is still the same principle, same idea. You just end up with slightly different variations, and that lets you prioritize traffic flows on a roundabout, which is something that is very difficult to do with your default City Skylines roundabout. That change did only have a small impact, however, so I still feel confident that what was previously recorded is representative of the roundabout when set up correctly. What does have a larger impact, however, is going into the options and turning on under Traffic Manager, putting the dynamic lane selection all the way up to 100, or at least a significantly higher number. So 100 obviously is going to be the best, but you do need a more powerful computer. 50% probably gives you a decent benefit over the 20% or so that was showcased in Yumble's video. So there are ways that you can significantly improve it. This intersection's efficiency. So here at the moment we're seeing backups at about the same length as we were seeing on the time traffic light, a little bit shorter to the west. Or rather, so the north is backing up just a little bit further than it was backing up to the west under the time traffic light, and the rest are about analogous to a number of the directions that were under the time traffic light. The west is showing very little backup at all, so we're getting a little bit here now, but that'll clear out soon. East is also showing very little backup, and a decent little bit to the south. So that was with dynamic lane selection up to the highest, and there are a few other little tweaks being made here. So that is one thing that you can do if you're dedicated. You can sit through and perform little tweaks to try and get it running as efficiently as possible, as you can with the time traffic light. So something I've done here is and it's not immediately obvious, I've just slightly lowered the speed limit along this section here, and that's going to give a slightly higher weight to using the central lane or the outer lane for traveling straight ahead. One thing that I notice when it does queue up, it tends to queue up in the central lane, and that's quite possibly because it's doing double duty, but also the central lane is the lane that has to give way to the most other lanes when entering the roundabout. Another thing you can do to get more vehicles entering the roundabout, now that we've sort of maxed out the number of vehicles that can exit the roundabout, is allowing blocked entrance on entering the roundabout. So you will get slight slowdown on traffic travelling through the roundabout, but it means that vehicles are a bit more aggressive when entering the roundabout, and you'll get a bit more throughput that way. You can do that to every element, especially since you do still have the give way signs, so they are still giving way to vehicles on the roundabout. Hahowever, I do like to only do it to those that need the extra help. So this one here doesn't need the extra help at all, so I haven't activated it here. This direction here to the east, I mean, it's got a bit of a backup now, but most of the time it's only backing up to around here, so I haven't decided that it needs that little bit of extra help getting people onto the roundabout, and I haven't activated it. I have had it activated for the south, but as you can see, that's reaching the point now where it's about the same as it is to the east, so I could probably disable it. Another way you're slowing down the traffic as little as possible on the roundabout and prioritizing vehicles being aggressive entering the roundabout from the directions that need it. So here to the north, we do still have a significant backup. But we did still have a significant backup when using the time traffic light. I didn't go through and fine-tune the time traffic light quite as much as this, however. And of course, the time traffic light does have that other advantage. It takes up significantly less space. You can add additional junctions slightly closer together using a roundabout than you can with the time traffic light, so you do need about this much space to queue for the time traffic light. However, on such a busy road, you probably wouldn't want to have roundabouts that close together either, so that's not a significant consideration. And yeah, the roundabout just takes up that much more space. So my recommendation still has not changed from, if you're in this sort of situation, use a time traffic light. But I am pretty happy that I got this roundabout to approximately the same efficiency as a time traffic light was. You can see they've still got a lot of cars, a lot of the hold up back here is all in the central lane, and cars that want to enter the central lane but can't. It's just slightly slowing down the number of vehicles that can get through here. So yes, I wasn't able to get a roundabout to function as well as the lights, but I knew it was going to be a tall order anyway. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't already, you should check out Yumble's and Biffa's videos on the subject.